Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Earth Under Siege Flashpoint from Dark Horizon Games. And this is a prototype. This is going to be on Kickstarter. I'll have a link and all those stuff down below. But this is a prototype. All rules, components, every single thing you see here is subject to change. And even this review, I'm probably going to title it First Impressions, just because while I am several games deep into this, the nature of it being a campaign game, where it is as a prototype, different things like that, I'm likely going to trend towards First Impressions while I give my opinion. Now, for context, it's not like a shying away from things. This is overall a very positive impression of of the experience I've had with the game so far, but just all those caveats in play. So let's go ahead and dive into this, talk about the game, talk about various factors, and then my opinion, what I like, don't like, all that stuff. At its core, this is a dungeon crawler-esque. I've been using the word esque a lot in many of my videos recently, but it's a dungeon crawler-esque. You're going to have various dudes on a map who are running around this dungeon with a structured goal in place. It's a campaign. You have a degree of stealth going on. It's going to be trying to infiltrate various, and again, I'm trying to explain the overarching thing, but every mission has slightly different goals or structure to it. But the general idea is you're going to be running around these hallways, trying to deal with various enemies, being mindful of stepping out into line, of trying to get line of sight to them, figuring out what these various patrol tokens are. You see, every single time you engage with line of sight with an enemy, you're going to discover what they are. So for example, in this insertion point over here, I have my two agents over here, and as soon as I open this door, as soon as I take an action, I have line of sight to that blip over there, and that means this blip, I now have to figure out what is there. What is going to be the card, the characters that are there. Let's go ahead and flip a card, and we have the Enslaver. The Enslaver is going to be over there. We're going to grab an Enslaver. We're going to check over here, and then Enslaver spawns spawn, and then two thralls over here. So we're going to look at the Vormach grunts. They're going to be the thrall over there, and we'll grab these over here and put them into play along with the Enslaver. So basically, you found the blip, you spawned the blip, and we're starting to get a little technical here, and I will not be doing a full rules overview. There's a lot of rules to go over. I'm focusing more generalities, but the goal is you're in this situation, you're dealing with this specific mission at play, and you have a specific goal that you're going to be trying to accomplish, a goal that will vary depending on the mission you're in. And so you're going to be trying to often have an insertion point, have to get to a certain point, deal with a certain thing, rescue a certain person, deal with a certain boss, and then make your way to the extraction point. That's the general structure, but again, everything's going to be slightly different. Past that, the game very much does have a focus on the aspect of stealth for the first part, and then run and gun for the second half of the game, because ultimately this game tends to punish you very heavily as soon as everyone knows you're there. As soon as everyone knows you're there, you're going to be spawning patrols, higher level elite patrols every single round, and you're gonna die, is what I'm trying to say. If you spawn those patrols too early before you've accomplished enough of what you need to accomplish, you're gonna die. That's basically what's gonna happen. You have to be very careful before you sit there and are prepared to deal with the fact that everyone knows you're there. And so the game is a bit of a challenge of trying to engage with those. You see those blips over there, they've seen us. Can we deal with them before everyone else becomes alerted? Can we actually go ahead and take them out and resolve them? Which, depending on who you are, you might have certain decisions at play. You see, maybe I want to go ahead and run out there and charge into them and start slaughtering them before they could alert the various guards and patrols and all those things, which sounds like a great idea. The problem is there's a camera over here. This camera over here is operated by these two agents over there in that room over there, and as soon as I step into the hallway, I have to make a stealth check. And so I'm going to go ahead and make a stealth check against my specific stat over here. It's this guy over here, Kyle. We're going to roll 4 dice because of a stealth check. I really don't want to be discovered right now, so I'm going to spend an extra one of these to upgrade one of this to a red die, which is going to give me more successes. And I do have to achieve a success level equal to the highest of their stealth checks, which is a 3. So I'm going to have to get at least 3 successes. Let's see how we do. And boom, that is 6 successes. Also a very good roll. There's only 1, 2 on the white-sided dice over there, so it's a very good roll. I got 6. I only needed 3. All safe, hunky-dory, good things are there, and I've evaded the stealth check. I'm going to go ahead and wander into there, at which point we're going to start slaughtering the enemies. But you're going to have a lot of these decision points at play as you go through the game. Again, I'm going general overview, not specific rules, but you can have a lot of these decision points in play as you try to wander through the mission trying to accomplish your objectives. The first thing, ultimately, in all the missions I've played, I don't know how far or whether things change, but in all the missions I've played, the first thing is make sure that first half of the game you are staying silent, you are staying under the radar, you are alerting specific patrols or blips as you encounter them, but then you're taking them out before they can become a problem for the various other people on the map. And when you have certain yellow blips, or different colors, different situations, this blue one over here is its own mission scenario thing going on, but when you have a yellow blip, yellow blips during the enemy phase are going to start wandering towards various points of interest. You see what happens over here is once these people are alerted, we're going to grab a little surprise token, and even once we take them out, we're going to flip it into a little point of interest over there, where patrols are going to start making their way that direction, because ultimately you hear a little scuffle in the hallway. It may not have been enough to actually trigger anything. I made sure to use my silenced pistol and my sword to take them out, so we don't have any loud noises, and yes, there is a noise mechanic in the game that you'll be checking for noise depending on the strength of the noise and counting out a certain number of distance points, so just, you know, noise stuff and all that. But then even without that noise, there's scuffles. People bang against the wall, you slice a head off, you shoot a guy, you elbow someone in the jaw, and there's just noises. And so this patrol is slowly making its way towards that little noise every single turn, at which point it will either find the noise, and that noise will escalate to this escalation track, causing more issues, or alternatively, will take out the patrol on the way, because I'll go ahead, step into the hallway, make another stealth check, and hopefully evade the camera, and then see what's in this patrol is, and start blasting away. You'll be making these decisions, but that'd be a horrible idea for context. That specific situation, not a good idea. But there's a lot of things going on as you try to stay alive, take out enemies, and just make your way towards the end. At a certain point, the enemy will become aware. They'll have to be, almost always. They'll have to become aware at a certain point, and you'll have to deal with the fact that it's now time to start shooting a lot and making your way out before the various patrols and the elite patrols start making their way towards you and ultimately killing you, because that will happen if you're not careful, and so you need to be mindful of that. Your individual operators over here, they all have 6 actions, and they have their own Overwatch token as well. And you're going to be taking those actions, and you're going to be utilizing those actions every round, and you have these 3 movement actions, and these 3 action actions, and it sounds like a lot, except for one small problem, which is every round, you only regenerate 3 of those actions. So you can have a really cool and powerful turn where you take a whole bunch of movement, a whole bunch of actions, you shoot, you run, you chase, you do all that stuff, and then the next round, you regenerate 3 of them, of your choice. Which means you can't do that cool superpower turn every single round. You'll have to spend a turn replenishing and resting if you want to take that action. But it does give you that push and pull, that mindfulness of whether you want to just prep yourself for a really powerful turn, or possibly have opportunities to rest and re-prep yourself for a really powerful turn. You're also going to be dealing with your own operator's hand of cards. Each operator is going to have their own hand of cards, and the game does have a system in terms of your actual operators you're managing, as well as kind of dummy operators, which means you could choose to, like right now if I was playing the solo, I could choose to operate each of these as full operators, I could choose to operate all of my operators as full operators, or I could choose to operate any number of them as full operators, and any number of them as partial operators. Partial operators will get an ability on them, but you won't be managing their hand of cards. So it just takes away some hand management, but it gives them a general ability to compensate. You don't need to play with all of them. I could play with 2 of them and deal with the mission threat level based on that as well. So you have a whole bunch of options as far as how you prep your team, how you deal with the general control of a bunch of characters in a solo and a multiplayer and any number of different player counts or situations. But I'll have my hand of cards along with my various actions that I'm trying to utilize. My cards will be used depending on the situation. We'll have different symbols in the top corner. These require an action. This will be a reaction. That's a free action. So the cards will have different opportunities that you can play them in, and you can also modify them by spending focus tokens equal to that little number over there. Focus tokens are what you can see over here, and there's a few ways to get them back, not heavily getting into them. You'll be rolling focus dice, things like that. But you have this hand of cards that will give you more flexibility, more choices, more things to be mindful of, in addition to your equipment, in addition to your actions, in addition to the board state, in addition to potentially scenario things that are going on as well. A whole bunch of things to manage and be aware of as you ultimately try to head towards your goal. The general idea, which I've spent like 8 minutes on the general idea is it's a dungeon crawler game with a degree of stealth mechanics baked heavily into the fabric of what you're doing as you try to be mindful of taking out baddies, but making sure that not everyone becomes aware of you, while dealing with things like opening locked doors, of taking out security cameras, taking out the operators of security cameras, accomplishing your specific mission objectives, and trying to not have yourself be overwhelmed by the board before you're ready. There's other things such as like this armory over here, where you can start finding new different equipment from the various equipment decks, a whole bunch of other side stuff, but that's the core idea of Earth Under Siege Flashpoint. A lot going on. I mean, the game has 50 pages of rules. I'm trying to condense the high-level stuff over here, which is a good tangent into ease of play. Ease of play, this game has a lot of rules. The game has, and this is prototype, so all those things are factors, but it has like 20 pages of campaign stuff, which I think will only get longer in the final game. It has 20 pages of a walkthrough mission, which is great, by the way. It's a really great walkthrough guide. The only problem is when you're done with that, you still have to read the 50 pages more of other rules. So altogether, we're talking about 90 pages of stuff to go through, and that's just in the prototype. That will hopefully get better in the final version. Arguably, there could be even more in the final version. We'll have to wait and see. The teach itself is actually not that bad, though. Learning the game is a lot to take in. The teach, though, as long as you have a single person there who's able to run all the background stuff, you can kind of get people up and running with a few basics, and then the rest they can kind of learn as they go. So while there is a lot for one player to make sure that they know, you can run the rest of the group fairly easily with maybe 10 minutes of teach, maybe 15, and then just guidance as things happen throughout the course of the game. So pros and cons in that category. Table space itself is not that bad. There are a lot of tokens and bits and cards and a whole bunch of things to manage, especially as you go from one campaign to the next, setting up, tearing down, grabbing your stacks of tiles. There's a lot to manage. The table space itself, not that bad, just a whole bunch of tokens and setup and things that might get in the way of stuff in general. And this is a campaign game. It hopefully will, I shouldn't say it does. I believe the plan is for them to have single-shot missions as well. I believe that's in there, hopefully, to get tos, and I know that I've certainly begged for it because it is the way I am most likely to continuously play this game as opposed to a campaign that I will want to play and not. But yeah, this is a campaign game right now, and so factor that in as well as far as the mental storage aspect, the aspect of diving in 3 games and then putting it away for 2 weeks and diving back in. Those all factor into ease of play. There's a lot going on here in terms of the rules investment, in terms of the setup stuff, in terms of just the sheer amount of content and all the stuff to be managed of, in terms of the rules overhead of having one scenario being completely different than the next, which is a pro and a con. It's a pro because you have a lot of variety from one scenario to the next. This is not just like, oh, new map setup and everything's the same. No, you actually have different objectives, different goals, different ways to approach the same situations. There's a lot going on, but the downside is you have to kind of read a whole page full of what's different, what's changing, what you have to be mindful of in this game compared to the last game. As far as player count, it's a 1 to 4 player game. I've only played this one at 1 and 2 players, although like I said already, it seems to work pretty fluidly as far as controlling the characters, giving you, the player, the agency to control things how you want. In general, not necessarily this game specifically, in general I find games like this at 4 players, I find that I'm not doing enough compared to the mental energy of being at the table versus the actual actions I'm taking. So I tend to prefer these games at 1, 2, and 3 players, but this one in particular, I've only played at 1 and 2. At both those player counts, really enjoyed it. Slightly different puzzles in terms of one being a solo puzzle as you try to figure things out, and the other being a cooperative experience where you talk it out, you discuss strategies, you discuss the benefit of running into this combat, of walking down the hallway, of going into the security room, whether we just take out the camera instead, where are we best spending our energy, our attention, and what is most likely to get us the win that we, well, ultimately want. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, a whole bunch of stuff over here. So, what do I like about this game? A lot of stuff. Now it's worth noting, by the way, if you've watched many of my videos of Kickstarter games coming up and all this stuff, I have been notoriously unexcited for Earth Under Siege Flashpoint for, I want to say, like 6 months plus since I first found out about the game. It looked pretty, it looked fun, it looked nice, but like it didn't necessarily pull me in past, hey, some cool miniatures and more dungeon crawler stuff going on. I just have a lot of games in the genre, and so this game, though, does have a lot that I actually really like. It has a lot that once I dove into it, I've moved from, I'm sure it's nice, to I really like this game. There's the action system to begin with over here. This little push and pull of the actions already gives you a degree of flexibility. When do you sit there and plan for that powerful explosive turn? Because you will have them. And then you'll also have turns where you're kind of trapped in a room as you wait for a patrol to wander closer to you. As you sit there in your little room, prepping your Overwatch and then flipping over, which basically gives you the opportunity to prep yourself for a fun little action as this patrol wanders into reach. Suddenly they're in your line of sight, and boom, you reveal what they are, but now you can go ahead and flip your Overwatch and take a powerful attack action on the go, out of sequence. You can prep yourself for things like that. So there's a balancing of your Overwatch, of your actions, of your card, of your hand of cards, and how you utilize them, and when do you use them for which specific benefits, when do you hold them from one round to the next, when do you just discard a card at the end of the round so you can draw newer and better cards, because you're always drawing up to 5 cards. So there's a lot of economy and actions going on in this game. And then you combine that with your equipment, because there's a whole lot of equipment you're going to get in the game. There's starter equipment, there's equipment you you're going to get between campaign missions. There's equipment you're going to gather from these various, whenever you have an armory type location. There's a whole bunch of fun stuff you'll have in the game. Fun stuff that gives you more decision space around how you combo different things. And then you have your character abilities. Ideally, if you're playing with any of these autonomous, not really autonomous, but controlled characters, you'll have their abilities as well. You'll have your focus tokens, you'll have your decks, you'll have the board state itself, you'll have the enemies you are facing off against. You'll have a ton of things going for you in this game as far as the balance of how you try to find the puzzle that works for you. As far as you have a group of guards over there, you know you need to take them out. If you don't take them out, they're going to alert everyone, and so you need to do this sooner rather than later. Can you do it? Can you not? Finding that pattern, finding the way characters work together, finding the specific cards and situations, poking a little camera out your door so you can see down the hallway, throwing a flashbang into a room. There's a lot of stuff going on here, and it all basically gives you the opportunity to actually get out of most bad situations. You see, most of the time, you encounter a group of guards, and your instinctive reaction is that you will not be able to survive. You will not necessarily survive, but you will not be able to take them out. You will not be able to do what needs to be done. Most of the time as you play this game, you find yourself facing another problem, a new situation, something else you can't deal with. But there's always a way to find your way through the puzzle amongst everything, or at least it's seemingly always a way. But how you combine things is a different story. And then there's a lot of dice rolling in this game, but there's also a lot of dice mitigation. There's going to be opportunities to discard cards from your hand to reroll dice. There's going to be opportunities to give up focus tokens to roll better dice. You're going to be rolling those black dice as well to get your focus tokens back. There's going to be a whole bunch of different options on the table. You have specific gear that you have that's going to let you roll extra dice. You can also tap that gear to get the extra action from that gear. You can modify the gear as you find different things and level up and power up your gear, both within the game as well as game to game as well, in between rounds, powering up and leveling up your characters, which is important because the enemies are going to get stronger and more powerful too. There's a lot going on in this game and a lot of flexibility as far as how you approach things, and it always feels like it's hard. I like that in the game. One thing I've generally said about, well, not generally, always say about cooperative games, to me a cooperative game thrives when you win the game, you feel like you could have lost, and when you lose the game, you feel like you could have won. And Earth Under Siege Flashpoint, at least so far, seems to have that aspect with an asterisk that we'll come back to. But it always feels hard, and yet it always feels like you can make your way through that hardness at the same time. So it has a lot of things going for it. Ultimately, to me, the core of why this game is fun is the puzzle. It is the fact that you are frequently presented with tough situations that you have to find a pathway through, and usually there is a way to find a pathway through. As far as things I don't like, I'm going to start with the most pedantic and nitpicky of all, which is I hate the door tokens. The door tokens blend into the map, you can't really tell which side is which. I hope it's a prototype thing that the graphic design is being changed, or that there's upgraded proper doors that you can throw on the map. Right now I'm not a fan of the door tokens at all, but again, this is a nitpick thing, it's an easily solvable problem. I'm not worried, but I'm just commenting because I'm supposed to do that in a review to a degree. Secondly is all the ease of play stuff in general is going to be my biggest factor over here, meaning all the stuff I touched upon doing the ease of play section, the tons of tokens, the campaign play, the amount of rules there are, the play rate. There's a terrible play rate that's absolutely, let me show you, there's two of these. There are two of these play rates, two double-sided play rates that are full rule sheets. These aren't play rates. These aren't helpful. They're way too big, way too cumbersome. I'm not going to be utilizing a 4-page spread of a full-page rule book as my play rate. The information has to be condensed, it has to be presentable, it has to be accessible, and you do need that information, don't get me wrong. It's not that you don't need it, it's just that this is not an efficient way of doing it. And so in general, all the typical stuff that I don't like in overly cumbersome, lots of stuff going on games is going to apply here as well. Now, again, worth noting, that's my general bias to begin with, meaning this is a me problem. Some people will have it, some people will not. I don't love large, cumbersome, fiddly experiences. I like diving into a game. I don't like having games, well, I like, but practically speaking, I can't always have games set up. And so I like to be able to move from one game to the next, from one game to the next, putting a game away, taking it out, playing it again, and the more stuff that goes into the setup, the tear down, the remembering what I was up to, all those are things that are barriers of entry to me personally. And those things are here as well. Now again, I did mention one-shot missions seem to be coming. That's certainly going to help. And some of the aspects going on with just the amount of stuff, it's the nature of a prototype as well, where everything's just thrown into a million little bags, nothing's organized well. Those are prototype complaints. Hopefully this stuff gets improved upon in the final version of the game, but the ease of play aspects are easily the biggest thing that I have a problem with. The last thing that I potentially have a problem with in terms of what I don't like is right now where I am, and again it's worth noting, I've played through the tutorial mission, I've played through the first few missions, but it does have a difficulty arc as you first start going through them. while the game always does throw situations at you that feel like you will not be able to survive that particular, not survive is the wrong word, that feel like challenging situations in the context of things like, oh, I won't be able to get out of here undiscovered or whatnot, at the end of the day, I found that so far, I've always found my way through those patterns. I feel like the game presents itself as being difficult and gives you the opportunities and the tools to get out of it, but so far I haven't yet truly felt that I was about to die. Not yet. And maybe that'll happen. Maybe that'll happen as I keep going through the experience. But for me, I either want difficulty scaling as an option in some way, shape, or form, or alternatively to just have, to ensure that as I continue to play, that when I'm 6 or 7 missions deep, that I instead feel like there's more of a challenge. I want to lose a game, or at least come close to it, having my tokens be completely flipped over as I take wounds, and surviving on basically the last remnants of my slowly gasping down the hallway, opening a door, and just making my way out exhausted. I haven't hit that yet. I have hit a lot of challenging situations, but none that I couldn't make my way through when I started thinking about how to combine everything. So I want it to be a bit more difficult, but again, that might already be on its way. It just might be a victim of where I'm up to in the campaign so far. As far as what I can see others not liking, there's a ton of dice rolling, an absolute ton of dice rolling. This doesn't bother me because of the fact that the dice rolling here, a ton of mitigation around it. So there are rolling dice, you're going to have skill checks left, right, and center. Every time you take an action within zone of a line of sight of an enemy, every time you take an action within line of sight of a camera, there'll be a lot of dice checks left, right, and center for anything from combat, to opening doors, to disabling security cameras, to just any action you take within line of an enemy. A lot of actions you'll take, but there's enough mitigation around those actions that I haven't found it to be annoying yet. And it's not like I might be exaggerating how frequently you're rolling dice. I would say any given agent is likely going to be making a skill check of some sort, an average of 2 or 3 times per turn. Now, arguably a lot, but not so much that it gets in the way of actually playing the game. It's more an issue of just, you might have a problem with how many dice are being rolled, and I've had a problem with many games in terms of how often you're doing skill checks, but I rarely feel like things are outside my control here. I feel like the decision points are there, the mitigation is there, the ability to re-roll is there, and while I have certainly lost checks here and there, I feel that on average I have a better degree of control of what's happening. So it's there, might be a problem for you, but hasn't been an issue for me. And then secondly, I'll touch upon the potential replay value. Any individual mission, it can theoretically be replayed. And on the plus side, by the way, the campaigns do seem to give you, the missions seem to give you a few different options in terms of how you tackle something. But those options are limited in scope. There's still a almost defined hallway you'll have to walk down, a defined pathway you'll have to take, and then there's small decisions along the way. Do we go into the security room and take out the guards? Do we try to deal with the camera? Can we sneak by this patrol, or do we wait for the patrol to come to us? There will be decision points along the way as far as how you engage with different situations, but the general pathway, to a certain extent, with the few games I've played, does seem to be a bit linear in what it's doing. And so because it's a bit linear, diving into the same game 2, 3, 4 times might have less replay value. Not no replay value, but a little bit less because you've had that puzzle. The downside of having every mission feel unique is that when you revisit it, that uniqueness is a little bit gone. So not a big deal at all. It's certainly not a big deal for me, which I'll be going through this game and playing through the whole thing and then diving into it a year later, so it won't be a problem. But if you're trying to dive into this on a regular, recurring basis and replay the same exact missions, you might find a touch of the luster is gone. As far as final thoughts and rating, and first impressions and all that, I really like Earth Under Siege Flashpoint, and it's primarily because it has a mechanic that I tend to like in games. It's a mechanic I like in Spirit Island, it's a mechanic I like in Marvel Champions, it's a mechanic I like in Sky Tier Horde, it's a mechanic I like in dozens and Too Many Bones. Dozens and dozens of cooperative experiences that I've had in which you are basically faced with a puzzle, and a puzzle that seems challenging, and an enemy that seems overwhelming, overbearing, a particular situation, a combination of things that you just can't make your way through. And then you find the puzzle. You see the combination. You see how I can use this character and that. And by the way, one of the things I didn't touch upon is you can use the character's actions interchangeably, meaning it's not like it's his turn, then his turn. I can take a single action, then a single action, then 2 actions here and a back there. You can go back and forth taking actions one at a time, which gives you a lot of control over the rhythm and flow of the game. Combine that with their abilities, combine that with their cards, combine that with their gear, combine that with the enemies on the table. And there's always some sort of way to see your way through the puzzle. The game is about finding finding that puzzle, but finding out how to survive, but finding out how to make your way to the next round, how to make your way to the next point so that you can just not trigger the alarm for one more turn, because that will be important to not trigger the alarm for one more turn. Like I said already, this mechanic I like in tons of games, Unsettled, Vindication, any number of games where there's just a puzzle to be solved, and this game gives me that puzzle to solve. It gives me that aspect of having an objective, having the general fun of rolling dice, taking out enemies, dealing with the various things going on the board, but then also having to figure out how to actually make your way through the challenges that each game throws at you. That is why I like this game. That experience is a mechanic and a mechanic and a puzzle that I generally appreciate and like. For me, the biggest barrier here is potentially just how easy is this game going to be to set up and table. Gameplay wise, I have minimal stuff in the way of complaints, nitpicks at best, but for a little bit more difficulty and things like that thrown in the way. But for the gameplay itself, it's a ton of fun and I really enjoy it. The question is, how hard is it going to be to table? Are there going to be one-shot missions? Is this a game that I'm going to pull out because I love it and enjoy it and have a ton of fun with it and it's easy enough to do so? Or is this a game that I really, really want to love and don't pull out because I just would rather pull something out that's easier the next time I'm playing it or whatnot? For right now, and this is a tentative rating, I'm giving it a 4 out of 5 in the first impressions category, with the caveat that I think there's like a 90% chance this is going to drift to a 4.5 as I continue to play. I think it's basically there. I want to see the final game. I want to see how accessible and easy it is to dive into. I really enjoy this game. I'm going to be backing the whole thing and all the stuff because it's a lot of fun. I just hope that I really actually pull it out and table it, because otherwise it's going to end up in the same category as Assassin's Creed to me. Assassin's Creed is a phenomenal game that I've played like 20 times, and also it's a game I'm ready to move on from because as a campaign game, I just don't know if I'm going to dive back into it again because it's not single shot, and I don't know if I'm committing to a full another campaign. Which, by the way, is a good segue to recommendations. Other game recommendations. I'm easily going to compare this to Assassin's Creed and V Commandos, both of those being the same general system from Triton Noir, and both those giving you a stealth-based system where eventually you're going to trigger the alarm, but if you do so too early, you're going to die, and along the way you're trying to figure out the puzzle, the combination of powers and abilities and things you can do to get yourself out of a tricky spot. If that sounds at all familiar to any of the things I said in Earth Under Siege, it's because it very much is, although I think that Earth Under Siege handles the stealth better. The stealth in Earth Under Siege is less victim to random dice rolls and a lot more control and agency as far as when you will be eventually discovered versus not. So I think I like the implementation of that's better. There's pros and cons to both systems, but the specific aspect of when stealth will be triggered, I like better here. And then the other game I'm going to compare to, a game that it feels fairly reminiscent of, is Sword and Sorcery. Now, Sword and Sorcery is a game I played a long time ago, but that was another game which had a lot of rules overhead, a lot of things, a great enemy AI, a lot of stuff, a campaign that you can kind of go through as you slowly but surely. But for me, it was a game that I really thought was excellent and then didn't pull out because there was a lot more work to consistently pull out and check stuff and all that. And that's the camp where I'm wondering where Earth Under Siege lies. I hope it's a game that I continue to play. I've begged the designer to please put in one-shot missions to make it more likely for me to table it, just because I mean, I love campaign games in theory. In actual practice, I'm just more likely to play games that have a one-shot experience, and I like Earth Under Siege enough that I really want to make sure that I get this game to the table. In any case, I am Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. You can see this game over on Kickstarter, links down below and all that. I highly recommend it. It's a great system, and one that I'm very excited to see where it ends up. Until next time, I just said that already. Have a good one.